Welcome to Issues That Matter. I'm Cynthia Poole, and my guest today is Scott Ritter and Diane Sare. And we're going to talk about an event that's going to take place on August 6th, the anniversary of Hiroshima. And it's, what was that again, Diane?
Humanity for Peace.
Humanity for Peace. So why don't you start, Diane, and tell us what it's about, because Scott will be one of the speakers.
Yes, I will, and I'd like him to actually fill in the why, because this Humanity for Peace is a true coalition of groups, of which the Schiller Institute, which I am part of, is one. But there are Republicans, Libertarians, People's Party, right, left, and in particular, we're also trying to have speakers representing the global South, because that's a voice that is not heard very much in the West. And if people heard from them, they might have a better idea why the stakes are so high for this dying Anglo-American imperial monstrosity. What Helga Zepp-LaRouche of the Schiller Institute said, and Scott has more of the strategic details to elaborate, is that it is her view that we are just marching toward a nuclear war unless there is some break. And the break has to occur in the West. It's not Putin who has to break. It's the insane, delusional, pompous Western governments that are driving this. On the rally per se, let me just say, I'm looking at the press release here, and there are sister rallies in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, in at least 10 other nations. There are 4 in Germany, Mexico, Guyana, Chile, the UK, Austria, France, Nicaragua, Guatemala, Malaysia, and then there are 7 in the United States. And maybe for funny reasons, I don't know why the Humanity for Peace website is having all kinds of issues, and we keep trying to get it back up. You can go there. It's humanityforpeace.net to find rallies if you're not in the New York City area, where we will be by the United Nations on Sunday, August 6th from 1 until 4. In the US, there are rallies in Oregon, Washington, Illinois, California. There's actually 4 rallies in California, and then at New York. So it's a very big deal. It's growing as we speak. Aside from Scott and myself, speakers in New York include Garland Nixon, Gerald Celente, Nick Brana, the head of the People's Party, Jose Vega, Amadou Diallo, who is the president and founder of the Ghanaian American League of Friends for Freedom from Guinea, okay, Jude Ely, who is a presidential candidate from Haiti, and then others, Reverend Terry Strong, she's the chairwoman of Action and Global Concerns for the National Church Women United, Malcolm Byrne, a Grammy Award-winning record producer who has a program in the Kingston area. I was just on it. So it's going to be quite phenomenal. It will be followed by a performance of the Mozart Requiem at 6 p.m., sort of a requiem for those people who died absolutely needlessly as a result of these bombings. And that has a combined chorus. And I'm very pleased that the orchestra is being conducted by a Turkish-American conductor who already was organizing many concerts for peace, but he is a major league conductor who agreed to donate his time for this. He used to direct, I believe, the Turkish National Symphony. And as we were doing outreach to other choruses to join us, a Japanese American chorus also will be part of the mix. So I think the whole day will be very powerful and hopefully will help to impel Americans to do what's needed and to be visible, because the media is outrageous and they are not giving the world a true sense, I think, of what the view is of the American people.
For people who are not near one of the demonstrations, will it be filmed on YouTube so people could see it?
It will be live streamed, and we're also looking for more live streamers, the people who are speaking, like Scott Garland, Nixon, others have channels that they want to live stream to. We'd like to do that too. We'd like to have a huge viewership. I should say 3 days prior, on August 3rd, the No to NATO group in the UK is having an online virtual rally, which will feature some people that people know, Richard Medhurst. I think that's George Galloway is involved in that. Helga Zepp-LaRouche actually will be on that, and others. And their last No to NATO virtual rally had about 500,000 views, I think.
Good. Scott, why did you decide to speak at this rally?
Well, back in February, I was asked to speak at a Rage Against the War Machine rally, and for a number of reasons that didn't happen. I did deliver a speech through my own YouTube, my Substack. I delivered it both in spoken form and written form. And in that speech, I spoke of the importance of educating the American people about the tyranny of nuclear war and the inevitability of our imminent demise should we not awaken. I would be about as hypocritical as the day is long if having gone public with such a stance when offered an opportunity to speak before a diverse audience on Hiroshima Day, that I wouldn't participate. It's imperative that not only that I speak. It's not imperative that I speak. I'm just one person. It's imperative that things like this take place, and it's an honor and a privilege to be considered as a voice worthy of being heard in such company. But this isn't about me or any of the speakers up there. It's about the American people. I mean, this is about, because let's just be frank here. We're the problem. There's no other problem in the world today. We're the problem. The rest of the world is the solution. We can sit down with the Russians at any time we choose, and we can resolve this nuclear issue through verifiable arms control. I've done it in the past. I think that's one of the reasons why my voice might be relevant here. Because when we speak about the potential of disarmament, I don't deal with theory. Screw theory. I deal with reality. I did it. Been there, done it, got the t-shirt. We can do it again. It's not impossible. Is it hard? Hell yeah. Any good thing's hard. It's going to be really hard, especially now that we have to win back the trust and confidence of the Russian people and the Russian government. We have to coerce the Chinese, in the proper sense of the term, a good sense of the term, get them to want to sit down with us. Why would the Chinese want to talk with us right now? Why in God's name would anybody want to talk with the United States? We are liars. We are cheaters. We are manipulators. Every treaty that we have signed, we have pulled out of, or we are in violation of. We are headed on a highway to hell. I wish we could get AC/DC to play that as our theme song, because that is exactly what's going on. We are on a one-way trip to hell, supercharged. It's over. I don't mean to be too blatant and callous here, but it's over unless we do something about it. And if you're waiting for the big moment, the 1 million people, the 5 million people, and you're waiting for that to happen before you get involved, you don't understand how you get 1 million people in the street. You get 1 million people in the street, one person at a time. And it begins with meetings like this, gatherings like this, where we begin the process of informing and educating people, showing that there is a viable coalition of like-minded, diverse thinkers. There are going to be people up there that might not otherwise want to be on the same stage with one another because they might have differences of opinion about other issues. But it doesn't matter, because those differences of opinion will melt away like the skin on your body when a nuclear bomb goes off. It doesn't matter. All the petty stuff that we do out here in life, all the little petty political differences are irrelevant, because once it goes flash, boom, bang, we're all equal. As Roger Waters sang in his song, 2 Suns in the Sunset. We're all equal in the end because we're all going to die. That's what we all have in common. So, yeah, I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to do this. I'm going to have to find a way to tone down because I'm about as angry as a man can get against the American people and the American government right now. And I have to be really careful when I speak out because the Marine in me wants just to wade into the crowd and punch them all in the face and wake them up, because that's what it's really going to take. They need to have their teeth knocked out, their nose smashed in, be laying on their knees, spitting blood, going, what the hell just happened? I would say, at least you're alive. Because when you get in the face by the nuclear blast, you won't be alive.
Right.
And your complacency in the face of this, this colossal failure of leadership that's taking place here in the United States. It's the complacency of the average American citizen. We aren't citizens. We aren't the wonderful individuals that the founding fathers thought of when they created this nation. We are a nation of sheep, and we are literally being guided by a shepherd called the nuclear establishment towards the slaughterhouse. And it's okay, because the nuclear establishment, they want this. They need this. They live for this. They are so self-delusional that they believe they can win a nuclear war, that nuclear wars are winnable. So they have no fear because they think they're going to ride this thing out. These are sick people who think that a victory in a nuclear war can be achieved by losing only 90 to 100 million Americans. 90 to 100 million Americans vaporized, and we won the war because we vaporized more of them than they vaporized of us. This is an illness. It's a mental illness. And the only treatment for it is through the vehicle of democracy. Vote them the hell out of existence. And it requires us to start picking good leaders to represent us, get people like Diane Sare in the Senate, get people in the House of Representatives, maybe get somebody like RFK Jr. in the White House. Who knows? Is he perfect candidate? There is no such thing as the perfect candidate. Is he flawed on several issues? You're damn right he is. Do I have disagreements with him on certain things? I do. And I would love to have the opportunity in the coming years to work through these disagreements with Bobby. But in order to do that, I have to be breathing air, which means I have to be alive, which means there can't be a nuclear war. And there's going to be a nuclear war. People don't get it. There's going to be a nuclear war. Think about our Ukraine policy in a nutshell right now. It's the insanity of it. Russia has a nuclear posture that says, if you threaten the existence of Russia, we will use all means at our disposal, including nuclear weapons, to deal with that threat. An existential threat to Russia includes stripping territories that Russia deems to be part of Russia away from Russia. So you have Ukraine saying they want to carry out a counteroffensive, the purpose of which is to rip the territories that Russia has annexed. Now, we can get into a political discussion about annexation if you would like to. But again, in order to have that discussion, we have to be alive, breathing. Right now, Russia says this belongs to us. Crimea belongs to us. If you try to take it away from us by use of force, we will use nuclear weapons to defend ourselves, which means the end of the world. And yet that's what Ukraine is doing, and we're the ones supporting it. We're sitting there saying, yeah, do it. We think this is a good idea. Joe Biden says, I don't think the Russians are serious about using nuclear weapons. The Russians are serious about using nuclear weapons. Let me make this very, very clear. If there is a threat to Russia, for instance, a threat to Crimea, Russia will use nuclear weapons in response. These weapons won't be launched against Ukraine. They'll be launched against NATO nations. They'll be launched against London, Paris, Brussels. And if that happens, then the question is, what is the United States going to do? Are we going to respond in kind? Hit a Russian site. And the second we hit a Russian site, every Russian nuke in the world goes off aiming at us because we miscalculated. You see, we think we can actually escalate to de-escalate. It's not theory on my part. We know this because we've practiced it. This is why we produced the W76-2 low yield nuclear weapon that we put on top of a Trident nuclear missile and an Ohio class submarine. And we had a Secretary of Defense, Mark Espers, practice launching it in a scenario based upon a Russian attack against the Baltics, where we practice launching a nuclear weapon against Russian forces in Russia. Now, the assumption was that by bang, making it go off and killing a bunch of Russian soldiers, the Russians got scared, panicked, and said, oh my God, we quit, we surrender, we alter our behavior. But in reality, that won't happen. Every Russian weapon will be launched. They won't launch it in waves, they'll launch it all at once, and the world will end. It's over. Within 30 to 40 minutes after that decision being made, none of us will be here. And those who live will wish they hadn't lived. If you manage to survive the immediacy of the nuclear blast, and remember, these are missiles that are going to hit every major population center in America. There will not be a major urban area in America left. If you live out in rural Kansas, you may get to live maybe a day, 2, 3 days more, but then the radioactive clouds are going to come in. But before the radioactive cloud hits you, you're not going to see the sunlight again, because all of this dirt and nonsense could be sucked up into the jet stream. And within a day, the world's going to be blanketed in a thick layer of ash, radioactive ash, that's going to be falling down on everybody while it shields them from the sunlight. Is that really what we want? Because that's what's going to happen, literally. No one will live.
Now,
So, yeah, I think speaking at on August 6th is probably a thing that needs to be done if you're serious about trying to stop this.
does Biden, Harris, the senators, and Congress people know the dire consequences? Really know the dire consequences if there is a nuclear war? Do they know it? Do they understand it?
Nope, not a single one.
You don't think so?
I know so. If they did, they wouldn't be doing what they're doing. You don't play these games. It's like saying, I understand the lethal impact of a 38 caliber bullet while I put it into a chamber, spin it, put it to my head, and pull the trigger. If I'm playing Russian roulette with a loaded pistol, I don't understand what's going on, or I'm suicidal. All right, so we have to decide, are American leaders suicidal, or do they not understand what they're doing? And here's the thing, you know, this is, I don't want to give away the Oppenheimer film because I think everybody should see it. I think it's an important film to see. But I wanted that film to scare me, and it didn't. That film educated me. I feel I have more insight into who Oppenheimer is and the politics of that surrounded the decision to manufacture. But I didn't leave the theater scared. And that's the problem. You see, I grew up scared. I grew up fearful of nuclear weapons. They were a ever-present reality. I lived next door to a nuclear weapons storage facility in West Germany that was going to be the #1 place hit by Soviet nuclear weapons when the war started. And while I lived there as a high school student, a war almost started several times. I mean, I told this story before, I'll tell it again. There was a book, Alas, Babylon, about nuclear conflict, and that was the code name that a Air Force officer would send to his family to say, the missiles are flying, it's over, I love you, goodbye. Well, my parents used that same phrase. On 2 occasions, my dad called my mom from the bunker saying, Alas, Babylon, which means gather the kids, be together because it's about to end. All right, this was real. I would go to school in the morning, not sure if there would be anything left when I came home, if I came home. This was very visceral. I was in the Marine Corps in a nuclear capable unit. We practiced firing nuclear artillery rounds in combat scenarios to make sure that when the time came to do it, we could do it and we would do it. And I'm here to guarantee you, if we had been given the order, we would have launched. No questions asked. That's the world we lived in. And I would thank God that he gave me the opportunity to participate in the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty, the one treaty, the first treaty to get rid of nuclear weapons and save the world from this one-way trip they were taking back in the 1980s. See, I've seen it all. I've been there, I've done it. And I'm looking today and we're on the same path. But there's nobody afraid anymore. No one's afraid. You say it was great to have these young kids going to the movie. No, it wasn't, because they left the theater not afraid. They left the theater entertained. They left the theater, pardon?
I want to say something about that, because for them, none of them had your experience growing up. And actually what Jose said to me was the first time he really was scared, because I guess in that age, you can't even really imagine that anyone would be thinking or talking about it. And it gave him perhaps an insight that this really could happen and that people really were doing it. Now, he is also a particularly thoughtful younger person, but I think for people who have been clueless, who haven't grown up in this, who didn't do drills under their desks and things like that, even such a discussion does have somewhat of an effect. Not the reality that you're expressing now, but I think many people really say, oh my, well, this is never going to happen. It's never going to happen. And they completely block out what we did at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. They have no understanding of it, no knowledge of it. When I was a child in my Quaker household in Maine, I used to we turned off the heat every night. So in the morning, I would run downstairs to get on the hot air vents when the heat would start coming into the house. And my parents, I would lie on the vent so I would see all the books on the bookshelf that were on the floor. And there was a book there about Hiroshima. And it had the stories of people who survived and the descriptions of people walking around with their skin hanging off and the absolute horror of it. And that became part of something that I knew. But we now have a whole generation that doesn't even have a clue, can't even imagine this, can't even imagine how anyone would think of it, which is what makes it so dangerous. And that is also why we're leafleting every single one of these theaters, because we do have to take them to the next level, which is this is where we are. People are that insane, and it is possible to do something which you might think is unthinkable.
Well, Diane, I know Jose, and I have a high opinion of it too. But I'll just say this: I've been to a lot of movies. It's something that I enjoy doing with my wife. We left Schindler's List. First of all, we didn't leave Schindler's List. Everybody sat in the theater when it ended. Nobody talked. Nobody talked. They just sat there. Then one by one, they left the theater in silence. I left Saving Private Ryan. I went there with some military guys, all combat veterans. Nobody talked, not a single word. You could hear the sobs in the audience. Oppenheimer finished and people got up and left. It didn't have the impact it needed to have. I've been in movies that have impacted, and I'm telling you right now, not a single person in the audience in Schindler's List knew what a concentration camp was, could have empathy for that. But the way the story was told, they left there feeling that they were part of that. Saving Private Ryan, there weren't any World War II veterans in there, but the people felt that they had been in combat. They felt that they had gone across the beach, that they had done the assaults. They felt that they were part of that story. Oppenheimer didn't take people into the horror of nuclear weapons. That's my only complaint with the movie, is that I was hoping that Oppenheimer could do for today's generation what The Day After did for my generation. The 1983 ABC series, The Day After, that scared the living dog poop out of everybody that watched it. It scared President Ronald Reagan when he watched it. Scared him so much that he turned around to his experts and said, "Hey boys, is this what it's going to be like?" And they said, "No, boss, it's going to be so much worse." And he said, "This is insane." Insane. Ronald Reagan, the Cold Warrior, the guy who was joking about missiles are on their way to Russia, said, "This is insane." And he did something about it. We need to find a way to get our politicians to say, this is insane. But first, we have to get the American people to say it's insane. We don't understand nuclear weapons. We're not afraid of nuclear weapons. They become so commonplace right now that they're there, they exist. we're no longer fearful that we live next door to something. They are part of us. We don't even think about it anymore. It's second nature. And
Right.
that's the problem.
A Secretary of State who says that climate change is worse than nuclear war.
Well, there'll be a big climate change, Tony, when the first hydrogen bomb goes off. It'll be the biggest climate change you've ever experienced. You only get to experience for a millisecond, but hopefully before your eyeballs vaporize, it gets to your head that, oh, I screwed up. You know.
So, Diane, what do you expect the outcome of your event on August 6th will be?
I don't know. I think a lot more has to be done. I do think that if this film had the impact that Scott is talking about, there would be 500,000 people or more out there. I am not particularly expecting that. In February in Washington, D.C., there were about 3,500 people there. And you saw the freakouts from the mainstream press. They said it was a rally of Putin apologists with Proud Boys carrying Russian flags. That's how it was covered. This, we will see. We're doing everything we can, but it is the case that people are not fully in reality, or they are, and they have a sense. I've been speaking at a number of events in the course of campaigning over the last week. And people are very upset about all kinds of things, which are actual problems, like the fact that you have hundreds of people sleeping on the sidewalk outside the Roosevelt Hotel because 90,000 migrants have been brought in to New York City. I learned from a retired detective that there's this drug Quill or whatever. One of the big groups of drug addicts is day traders. It's people on Wall Street who are now having horrible reactions to this heroin, this whatever it's called, Quill-laced heroin that they're using. There are serious problems. When I say to people, we are on the brink of a nuclear war, we're much closer to that than you think. And I will see people in the audience nodding, but not one of them will have mentioned it before I speak, because there's such the media, we are in the most unbelievable media. The fact that you have John Brennan, the former head of the CIA, as an anchorman at MSNBC, and that it's like a revolving door between the intelligence agencies that are lying to our elected officials, lying to the president, and then they run the media, creates this bizarre realm where people go blithely about their business. And even if they're worried about something, they believe that no one else is, and then they don't discuss it. And then they feel really they have nothing to do. So, or they can't do anything about it. Somehow we've got to shatter that. And I wanted to actually bring up what's happening in the global South, because I had an experience. I had this delightful, she's called a nuclear power communicator, a young woman from South Africa, whose father had been involved in the freedom movement. She's talking to me while they're in a blackout, because they have 2-hour-a-day rotating blackouts, but she's a really staunch advocate for nuclear power. And I brought up to her a memorandum of Kissinger from 1975, where he called for depopulating 14 countries, that if you don't stop population growth in these nations, they're going to use their own raw materials, God forbid, they'll become influential politically. And she shrugged it off. She said, well, it's not working. She said, we know what they're doing. We read the alternative press. Putin just had an Africa-Russia summit in spite of intense pressure from the colonial powers. I think it was 17 or 19 African heads of state still showed up. Virtually every African nation was represented. The president of Eritrea, I think, Afwerki, had remarkable comments saying, we know what this war is. There's no Ukraine-Russia war. This is a war of the West against Russia. We don't want part of this. We want development. So there's a kind of a calm confidence, not that they think the world is safe, they don't, but leaders saying, we're never going back to slavery. You're not going to scare us You're not going to divert us with your little conspiracy theories about this or that. We want our independence. We want economic development and sovereignty, and you're not going to have this kind of influence over us anymore. On the other hand, what I see from Americans is this terrified acceptance of everything, thinking like a subject, thinking like a slave, and not breaking out of it. And I think that is crippling us, in a sense, from taking responsibility for what's being done in our name, being done by our government. And I think Scott's remarks will be very useful, because perhaps people having the living daylight scared out of them and realizing that all these silly things, and even legitimate things that you're worried about that are legitimate problems, really are nothing if we have a nuclear war, and we're headed there much faster than you think. I mean, all these drones, I wanted to ask you about this, all of these drones landing in Moscow. What is the purpose of this? Is it intelligence gathering? Is it trying to annoy Russia and get Putin to make a misstep so they can use that to do something more aggressive? The F-16s, which can't even be launched from Ukraine, which I think makes any place they're launched from a target. There's a million ways this thing is being escalated, and people don't know about it and don't consider that that's what we're doing.
Well, I mean, the Mikhail Podolyak, he's a presidential advisor to Zelensky, has articulated the Ukrainian strategy. And the strategy is to achieve meaningful military success on the battlefield that deflates Russia, brings doubt to the Russian military ambitions, and then that doubt spreads to the Russian public, who carries out a Moscow Maidan and removes Vladimir Putin from power. And a key element of this is the demoralization of the Russian public, to strip them away of any belief that the Russian government can save them, to make them feel powerless, helpless, and to transfer their fear, turn it into anger, angst, and have that focused on the Russian government. So that's the purpose. These are terrorist attacks, plain and simple. Design is to demoralize, to bring fear to the citizens of Moscow, so that when the time comes, and we see that, we already know they tried this during the Prigozhin insurrection, the Western intelligence services were encouraging people to rally at the Manege Square, to have a giant rally against Putin. Nobody showed up. It shows you how successful this is, but that's what they're trying to do. The same thing with the attack on the Crimea Bridge. It's designed to demoralize people, not to achieve any discernible military result. Again, all of this, the problem is the West thinks in iterative fashion. We look at this as though we're cutting off slices of a cake. But the Russians are starting to think in strategic fashion. And you saw this with there was an article written by a Russian noted academic, and he talked about the need for Russia to change its nuclear doctrine away from preemption, and I mean away from responding deterrence, and instead assume a doctrine of preemption, to copy the West. And what he said is that if the Russian military is unable to achieve a strategic victory this year, there's a danger that this conflict will become a frozen conflict. And then what will happen is that Russia will burn itself out while the West starts to accumulate strength. And eventually there will come a situation, whether it be 2 years, 3 years, 5 years down the road, where the West will be threatening the existential survival of Russia. And at that time, Russia will be called upon to use nuclear weapons, but Russia will be at a disadvantage at that point in time. He said, so since we know that's the direction they're heading, we should adopt a policy of preemption. And as soon as we believe that we're heading in that path, we need to nuke NATO. And the way he wrote the article is, we'll hit Poznan as a demonstration. We'll just take Poznan off the map. Boom. And then you're challenging Biden to say, are you willing to trade Boston for Poznan? Are you willing to step up for the Poles who provoked this fight and get involved in a nuclear exchange where you're going to lose an American city? And then you'll lose all of America. And the gamble is that Biden will say, no, I'm not willing to do that. But I will tell you that it doesn't matter what Biden thinks. The nuclear establishment will be demanding retaliation. And there isn't an American, we don't have a Jack Kennedy anymore. We don't have a president able to stand up to Curtis LeMay, able to stand up to the Pentagon, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, as Jack Kennedy did, and say, no, we are not going to do this. Maybe RFK Jr. could be that man, since he likes his uncle so much and appreciates his legacy. But Joe Biden isn't the man. I can guarantee you that Donald Trump wouldn't be the man. They would succumb to the temptation that we can win a limited nuclear war, not understanding that there's no such thing as a limited nuclear war, and a general nuclear war can be won by no one. This is the danger that we live in. We live in a fundamentally flawed society, and the Russians are the discussion that we just talked about. I just mentioned about the changing of their doctrine isn't something that's done on the periphery. I'm here to tell you right now, because I got it from the horse's mouth, from the people who sit on the meetings. This is mainstream. This is being done by the councils, the advisory bodies that meet and advise the president. They are all coming together in one mind that Russia must transition to a policy of nuclear preemption. But the difference between America and Russia is that a policy of nuclear preemption means the Russians will use it preemptively. They don't joke. They don't bluff. They're not playing games. And remember, Russia has said a couple things that people need to reflect on. One, a world without Russia is not a world worth living in. So anybody who thinks you can take Russia down, understand you're committing suicide. Because while Russia isn't threatening you, if you threaten Russia, Russia will kill everybody. And then the other thing is that Putin said, if we won't be the first to use nuclear weapons, but we won't be the last. I mean, we won't be second either. And if there is a nuclear war, we'll all die, but we'll go to heaven as martyrs. You'll just be dead. Okay, the Russians at the highest level are ready for this. They understand what they're fighting for. They understand what they're willing to sacrifice. They will go to war. They will wage nuclear war. They will not be intimidated. The world is going to end because we don't understand it. We're playing a game. We're playing some sort of geopolitical chess game. The problem is the guys that are playing the chess game never learned how to play chess. They're playing checkers. They don't understand that every move they make is stupid, is wrong, is dumbheaded. They'll checkmate before they know it, but in checkmate in a game of nuclear chess means we're all dead. So this is disturbing that we have such incompetence. We have lost the generations of, Paul Nietzsche should send a shiver down anybody's spine who knows that name, because he's the guy who got us into the Cold War. He's the guy that came up with NSC 68, the containment policy. He was Mr. We're going to confront the Soviet Union. We're going to push it back. We're going to do all that. He was also the INF treaty negotiator. You see, Paul Nietzsche is a guy who understood Russia. Paul Nietzsche was a guy who was scared of Russia, not as a coward, but he knew what the hell was at stake. He understood what was going on. He was there at the creation. He was one of the guys who debated, the name of the book, From Hiroshima to Glasnost. This is the guy that sat there and said, take him out in Hiroshima, blow him up, kill him. bomb them, and then do it again in Nagasaki. Although it wasn't supposed to be Nagasaki, it was supposed to be another city. Because with a K, cloud coverage, 30-minute delay, roll of the dice, Nagasaki got the hit instead. Did people know that if we were at war with Germany, I just learned this the other day, that it was never about, I mean, we've been having this discussion about, why did they bomb Japan? We were always going to bomb Japan. Even if Germany was there, the first nuclear strike was going to be simultaneous against Germany and Japan, because you can't keep it secret. So if we were going to take out Germany, we had to hit Japan no matter what. And it was always being done to intimidate the Soviet Union. So, this is the guy that came up with this insanity, Paul Nietzsche. Yet he's the guy that came up with the solution because he understood the problem. We don't have anybody in power today that understands the problem. No one. They don't, so how can they possibly come up with a solution?
So Diane, after the rally is over, would you and Scott come back on and talk about the event and what you think people learned and will implement because of it?
Sure, if everybody watching this show comes to the rally, then
Okay.
we'll come back. They should be there Sunday, August 6th at 1 p.m. at Dag Hammarskjöld Plaza across the street from the UN, 47th and 1st. I just want to say that.
Now, I have a worldwide audience with issues that matter. Tell us the other places there will be rallies.
There will be one in London, Austria, France, 2 in Paris, actually, Nicaragua, Guatemala, Malaysia, Mexico City, Mexico, Guyana, Chile. Germany has 4 of them, and then 7 in the US. And hopefully, whatever's happening with the Humanity for Peace website, they can go to humanityforpeace.net and if people are somewhere where there's not a rally, organize one. I think we should have people in the street everywhere, even if it's 3 people with a sign. No nuclear war, no nuclear war with Russia. Stop arming Ukraine. Stop this.
So what's on your plate for the next few months, Diane?
Well, presuming we survive, then working to build this campaign. And my campaign, I should say, is not just local to New York, it's national and international. Members of the US Senate have enormous power. That's why it's so criminal when people like Schumer and Gillibrand support these insane policies. And I'd like to reach a lot of people. I would hope we would have many people running for office who share my concerns. I appreciate very much what Bobby Kennedy Jr. is saying about this. I was at his town hall with Sean Hannity, and he really stuck to his ground on the Ukraine-Russia situation, and the audience was extremely sympathetic to that, even though Hannity kept saying what a criminal Putin was, etc. I also think it's useful that Trump keeps coming out and denouncing the war and saying it would end. I don't think you're going to end it by being tough with Putin, because that's not the issue. But it does indicate that people on both sides of the aisle know we're heading towards something very dangerous, and that the not only current administration, but this legacy of bureaucrats in Washington, the intelligence agencies in London and Washington, NATO, are responsible for it.
Scott, how's the movie going?
Well, we're making a trailer, and we'll use that together with some other fundraising techniques in an effort to raise the money necessary to bring the film to fruition. I mean, unfortunately, that's the reality you live in. Nothing happens for free. So, we're moving in that direction. We hope to get the trailer out soon. I know that you and I are going to be doing something on August 23rd,
Yep.
in that effort to help generate funds for the movie. And the movie is an important part of what we're doing here. The movie is designed to not only promote nuclear disarmament, but also help vaccinate the American public from, I know Bobby Kennedy Jr. is going to hate that. Sorry, Bobby. I'm just borrowing a metaphor here. But so maybe we won't use vaccinate, but basically, to try and immunize the American public from the disease of Russophobia. Because this is the problem. The reason why the American public isn't engaged is that they're being told to be afraid of Russia, that Russia's the problem. Russia's not the problem. We're the problem. And so this film is designed to break down the walls of ignorance-based fear, get people to be willing to think with an open mind about the reality of Russia, and in doing so recognize that there's nothing to fear from Russia. And that, again, wrote Franklin Roosevelt, the only thing to fear is fear itself. I mean, there's nothing fearful coming out of Russia today. And if they do that, then they might start thinking about nuclear disarmament and arms control with a rational mindset. Because the second you inject fear into it, fear makes people irrational. It makes you ignorant. It blinds you. You become focused on the wrong things. But if you can liberate them from this fear, they can start thinking about what's really going on. And I honestly believe that there's not a rational human being out there, when given the facts about the threat posed by nuclear weapons and what can be done to bring an end to this threat, won't say, sign me up. That's what I believe in. That's what I want to do. But it's hard to get them to do that when they've wrapped themselves in the shroud of ignorance-based fear. So the movie is designed to attack that problem.
Great. And we'll be talking about that as time goes on. But you guys are going to New York this weekend, and when you come back, I'd like to do a show about what you saw, what you heard, and what outcomes and what you learned from it, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay, so you've been listening to Issues That Matter. I'm Cynthia Poole. My guest is Diane Sare and Scott Ritter, and we'll talk soon. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thanks, Diane and Scott. Have a great day.